name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here then welcome to my channel, and in today's video we are going to be ranking all of the manga that I read in 2024, and I did in fact read a lot of it in 2024. And we are going to be ranking all of them from my least favorite to my most favorite, and as always these are just basically ranked by what's in my heart and my personal feelings. But they are also ranked by quality and how much of a series that I read throughout the year. And you know, different things factor in at different times, but what matters most is that this list makes sense in my brain, and it mostly does, I think. And the only rule that I really have here is that in order to qualify for this video, I had to have read at least one volume of a manga series, or like if I can't go by volumes, just like 10 chapters, or it just had to be like a one-shot or something like that. So with that, let's go ahead and start with my last place series, which is going to be Volume 1 of Mission Yozakura Family. And this follows our main character who has been on his own ever since his parents died, with the exception of his childhood best friend. However, he soon finds out that she is actually the head of a very powerful family of spies that includes her creepy older brother, who wants to kill literally anyone who goes near her, and when he sets his sights on our main character, the only way for him to survive is to marry into the family. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie here, this is also kind of in last place because of their anime, which I didn't like at all, and I increasingly disliked it more the more that I watched it, and I watched like half of it. But I do hate that older brother. He is very creepy, and the series does kind of know that he's creepy, like they kind of make a joke out of it, which in a sense did make it more readable for me, but it still wasn't great overall. And while this volume did have some fun moments, and I did like some other members of this family, I also just didn't get super invested in it. I didn't really gel with a ton of the comedy, and while I thought the romance was cute, this just wasn't for me, and that's okay. They had a good run. Next up, we have chapters 1 through 19 of Shadow Eliminators. And this follows a high school student who has a very strong sense of justice that gets turned upside down and tested when he gets exposed to otherworldly beings. This one is a little more sad because they did only make it 19 chapters before they did unfortunately meet their inevitable doom in Shonen Jump. So they never really got the chance to wrap up nicely here, and I do mean that the pacing was way off. And it was just kind of a mess for a while, but I also do feel like they were starting to get really exciting when they got cancelled. And I also did like the characters, and I liked the art style. I never minded reading this. The action scenes were honestly kind of fun, but also at the same time, I do see why this happened to them, even if I was rooting for them. I do think that there was some potential here for sure, but it just wasn't meant to be. So here we are. Next up, we have chapters 1 through 10 of Saturn Apartments, which is all of Volume 1 and then a little bit of Volume 2, and Saturn Apartments takes place in a future where humans are living in a giant structure that forms a ring around the Earth 35 kilometers in the sky. The higher the floor, the greater the status, and our main character is the son of a window washer, who has since disappeared and is assumed to be dead, and after graduating from junior high, our main character ends up taking on the same occupation that his father once had, and he gets an outsider's look into the lives of the people living within the Saturn Apartments as he struggles to adjust to his new working life. This is a series that didn't necessarily do anything wrong. They're a solid slice of life series in a really interesting setting with a unique art style, but I did find them to be extremely formulaic. Like, they didn't really do anything to make me want to read more than the 10 chapters that I set out to read. Because the series was a part of my I Read 3 Random Manga series video, and 10 chapters was the minimal amount of chapters that I wanted to read for that video. I could see the series doing some really amazing, meaningful things down the line, especially with their setting. But again, I have no idea if that's true or not, and I probably never will at this point. Next is Monsters, which is a 46-page one-shot by the One Piece creator. It got a Netflix anime adaptation in 2024, and it follows a samurai who stumbles into a town that will soon face off against a dragon. So I'm not really a fan of One Piece. I mean, sometimes I am, but there are other times where I really do actively hate them. So going into Monsters, I didn't really know what to expect, but I ended up really liking it. I liked the characters, the plot twist was good, it was well paced, it had a really fun battle and an art style that made me feel nostalgic. So yeah, it was only 46 pages, but I was fully content with what I read here. And that is going to bring us to our dining table. And this is a BL manga that follows our main character who has a talent for cooking but has always struggled to eat around others. That is until he meets two brothers who are many years apart in age who ask him to teach them how to cook. Afterwards, it's not long before our main character finds himself falling in love with the meals that they share together, and also just falling in love in general. This was adorable and super sweet. I just do wish that we got more development here when it comes to the relationship. Like, I would have loved for this to have been a little bit longer to get more moments between them and just to have some better pacing. But despite that, this did manage to have some really solid emotional moments and character deep dives that I really enjoyed. And I mostly just wanted something cute and cozy from this, and they succeeded in that, even if I do think that they could have done more. Next, we have volumes 1 through 3 of Yashahime Princess Half-Demon, and this is the sequel to Inuyasha, and it follows Sesshomaru's daughter Toa, who is living in modern times, which isn't easy for her as she has no memory of where she came from and has to conceal her mysterious powers and just has trouble fitting in general. But when a demon attack sends her back to the feudal era, she, her sister Setsuna, and her cousin Moroha have a mission given to them by the Tree of Ages to fulfill their destiny by finding their parents and healing a rift in time. So I am very far behind on Inuyasha, and that kind of feels like an understatement because I am still very much in the beginning stages of that series, but I did land on Yashahime for my I Read 3 random manga series video, so I read it anyway, and it wasn't the worst choice I've ever made. I do think that I missed out on like some of the connections to the original series because I just don't have that kind of like attachment or bond with it yet, but I can appreciate what the series was doing even if I can't fully appreciate the gravity of it like somebody with a longer history with Inuyasha could. There is this one relationship from the original series that I was unfamiliar with prior to this, and I do wish it stayed that way. And it is insanely creepy in terms of like age gap and power dynamics, and they are making it out to be like this amazing love story, so didn't like that. But what I did like were our three main characters. I loved watching them journey together. The action scenes were very fun. They had some very fun banter. And I also really liked the art style. Like, I could see myself returning to this series one day, especially because I do think the story just needs like a little more time to fully come together for me. Because again, there is some potential here, but when I get to experience that potential, that's for future me to figure out. Because present me is moving on to volume 1 of Crossplay Love, Otaku and Punk. And this is a romantic comedy that follows a delinquent who is in love with a girl who works at a maid cafe. But he's too embarrassed to go in and talk to her until he dresses as a girl himself. And this girl that he's interested in is actually his otaku classmate who feels more confident and comfortable around others when he's also dressed as a girl. This was very adorable, very silly, it had a lot of really fun moments, but I do think that I need to read more of this series before like actively forming an opinion on it and getting too invested and attached here, because I think it's going to be really telling when that misunderstanding clears up and just how they handle that, both in terms of their handling of LGBTQ+ themes and also just for the sake of the story itself. It could get messy very quickly, but they have shown me that they are capable of handling things well. Maybe not always perfectly, but I do think that they can do it, so we'll see. Next up, we have another one-shot, which is Goodbye Eri, and this follows our main character who tries to record the final moments of his dying mother on his phone. When the movie he makes from this footage isn't well received, he goes up to the roof of a hospital building and attempts to unalive himself. But before he can, he meets a strange girl who convinces him to make another movie. This story had a really amazing art style and composition as a whole. There's a lot about it that felt really smart. And it did feel like I was reading something special, which that's kind of usually the case when it comes to Tatsuki Fujimoto. And this very much did feel like his work in a lot of ways. I was expecting to get more attached to this and to these characters than I did though. So I do feel like I missed out on some of the more emotional moments that I thought would hit harder than they ended up hitting me. And I also didn't love the ending either, but I can still recognize this for what it is in terms of quality overall. Next up, we have volumes 1 through 4 of Hirano and Kagiura, and this is the spin-off series of the BL series Sasaki and Miyano. And this one focuses in on Hirano and Kagiura is starting his first year of high school and is living in the dorms with his new upperclassmate, Hirano. And he's originally concerned that Hirano may be a delinquent based on his appearance, but he soon finds out that he's much nicer than he thought. And this follows their daily lives together as they begin to fall in love. This is a very slice of life, very sleepy little series, and sometimes I do think that it is a little bit too sleepy, especially the light novel. But some of those simple simple, sleepy slice of life things that they do here are very cute. And I enjoyed watching these two develop their relationship with one another. The communication has been interesting so far. It's not always a story that has like a ton going on just in general, but they do have some really sweet and really fun moments together, and the more that I read this, the more that I liked it. And I also got more invested in the story, but mostly just the characters as time went on as well. And next up, we have Volume 1 of Welcome to Demon School Iruma-kun, and this follows our main character whose parents have sold his soul, and he now has to attend school in the Netherworld, where he will have to keep his identity of being a human a secret. I do wish that I got to read more of this series in 2024, specifically in October, but this volume was still really fun, and it was also a nice revisit to the storyline as well, since it has been a while since I've watched this portion of the anime, and I have, in fact, really missed them, and I was also just really in love with the art style and character designs and overall aesthetic, but again, also did kind of already know that from the anime. They also have a lot of heart and a lot of amazing characters, and I hope to have more fun with them soon, because this was a great start. Next up, we have Volume 3 of Blue Period, and this follows our main character who is a high school student, and despite his good grades and good group of friends, he is living a pretty dull life. However, that all changes when he wanders into the art room one day and sees a painting that awakens him to the beauty of art, which compels him into learning about and creating art himself and experiencing all of the challenges that come with that. Every time I pick up a volume from the series, I feel like I get fully invested back into the story all over again, and I feel like these volumes do take me longer to read than most. And again, they have a lot of amazing characters. It's been really nice to get to know them throughout these volumes and just see what kind of relationships develop, because there are a lot of interesting ones and friendships, and I also do really love the story's focus on art. They've always felt super inspiring to me in that sense, so yeah, this is definitely another one that I want to read more of soon, because I don't read this series nearly as much as I should. Like, one volume a year just isn't enough. Next, we have Volume 1 of The Guy She Was Interested In Wasn't a Guy at All, and this follows a fashionable and upbeat high schooler after she falls hard for an employee at her local CD shop who has the same taste in music as she does. However, that mysterious, well-dressed, and male employee is actually her reserved female classmate who sits right next to her and is very aware of her crush. This was a really strong start. I like their vibe a lot, and I also really like their focus on music. I think their relationship is interesting, and I really like their dynamic with each other so far. This volume did feel very much like an introduction, like a setup, and I'm excited to see where it goes. It has a ton of potential. Next up, we have Volume 9 of Yona of the Dawn, and this follows our main character Yona, who is a princess who is living the perfect life. However, that all changes one day after she witnesses the murder of her father. She flees for her life with her guard and struggles to survive and evade their enemies while also dealing with the shock of what just happened to her, especially when the path ahead of her seems so unclear. Again, this is another one that I wish I read more of in 2024, and I feel like I've always wanted to just fully throw myself into this series and just immerse myself in everything it has to offer all over again, but it just hasn't happened yet. I did rewatch the anime in 2024 in order to do that though, and I read this volume right afterwards, and it was a ton of fun. It had a lot of like fun, silly comedy going on, and I also love the characters a lot and I want to see more of them. I also just really love like all of the fantasy happening, and clearly the only way that I'm going to get more of them and this world is by reading the manga. And this volume did get me excited to read more of it, and I wish I followed through with that. I don't know why I didn't. But next is a series that I am all caught up to, and that is RuriDragon. I read chapters 1 through 26 in 2024, and this follows our main character as she tries to live her normal day-to-day life after waking up one morning with dragon horns. So fun fact, I tried to read this series back when it first started because it was getting a lot of love and it looked really cute, and I just didn't get into it and I dropped it really early. But they came back recently from hiatus in 2024 and I wanted to try again. And this was the right time, I guess, because I had an amazing time with this series. They were so comfy and so relaxing and just so full of heart, and I caught up to it as fast as I could. I will say, ever since catching up, my excitement to read this series every week has kind of dropped some. I do think that I am just kind of waiting for the plot to really grab me again, but I'm also not going to complain about what we got from this series in 2024, because it's still been really good even if it hasn't been my favorite of the series that I'm caught up to. Next we have volumes 3 through 7 of Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, and this follows our main character who has landed his dream job and all seems to be going really well for him, until he discovers the exploitative nature of his new workplace, and after 3 years he is unable to recognize himself and has lost all passion for life. However, that all changes one day when the zombie apocalypse breaks out and he realizes that that means that he doesn't have to go back to work, and he sets out to complete his new bucket list of the 100 things that that he wants to do before becoming a zombie. So these volumes include an arc that I didn't love in the anime, and it still wasn't my favorite here, but this was still really solid. And I am now past where the anime leaves off, which is what I've always wanted from this series, and I had so much fun with that new content. And that new content was somehow more absurd than we already were before, and I love that for them. Like, they wouldn't be Zom 100 without that. And they do have a lot of silly, absurd, raunchy comedy, but again, they also do have a ton of heart. And those are always the moments where this series resonates with me the most. Next, we have the full collection of Venus in the Blindspot, and this is a best of collection of 10 of Junji Ito's shorter works. This was the final manga that I landed on for my I Read 3 Random Manga series video, and it was also my favorite that I read in that video. And it's also probably my favorite Junji Ito collection as a whole, with only a couple of stories that I didn't prefer, and even more that are some of my favorites that I've ever read from him. Even though I do think a lot of them leave off in a way that feels like they should have kept going, but they don't. So it really did feel like I was missing out on like extra content that just doesn't exist. But yeah, favorite collection for sure. It had incredible, interesting horror and an amazing art style as usual. However, it is still not my favorite from Junji Ito. That's coming later. Next, we have all of Kaiju No. 8 B-Side, which includes chapters 1 through 12. This was a spin-off series of Kaiju No. 8 that follows extra stories from the main series and just kind of gives more insight into a few of the characters and just how things came to be. This spin-off was not long for this world, and I do wish it was longer, but I really feel like they made the most out of those 12 chapters, and they have some really amazing stories in here. Like, there wasn't anything in the spin-off that I didn't really love, which just seems to be the case for Kaiju No. 8 in general. And it also gave me extra insight and content from some of my favorite characters, and also filled in some gaps that I kind of do wish that the main series did. And all of that combined with some really amazing art and action scenes, so yeah, no complaints here. Next, we have I Hear the Sunspot Theory of Happiness and Volume 1 of Limit. And this is a BL series that follows Kohei, who is deaf and has kept his distance from life on campus as he is often misunderstood. That is, until he meets Taichi, who tells him that his hearing loss is not his fault, which opens Kohei's heart and breaks through all of his defenses. And I do feel like these two volumes here are fully getting carried by this first volume on my list today, and I love this volume so much. It was so wholesome and sweet and just amazing and fully lived up to the cover in terms of atmosphere. And then the story continued, and I feel like we got a lot of angst that didn't fully get resolved, and then we just moved on to more angst, which that's not good for my heart at all, especially after how much I love this first volume. And I do think that I need some more character growth as well here, so yeah, it's a little messy right now, but I do still really love them. I do still feel a lot of attachment to them, again because of this first volume, so hopefully it works out. Next, we have volumes 21 and 22 of Haikyuu, and Haikyuu follows our main character who wants to be the best volleyball player ever despite his shorter height. And I mean, it's Haikyuu. All of the amazing things that I've ever said about this series are still true for these two volumes, and the only reason why this series isn't higher today is because I only read 2 volumes. But I still love the characters, I had a lot of fun with them, and the comedy, I got really invested in the volleyball matches that were happening here. There's also just something about this series that will always be a huge comfort for me whenever I read it, and these 2 volumes only confirm that even more. Next, we have volumes 2 and 3 of Komi Can Communicate, and this follows our main character Komi, who has extreme social anxiety but wants to make 100 friends. And then this also follows her wallflower classmate who makes it his mission to help her accomplish that. And this is kind of similar to Haikyuu, where the only reason why they're not higher on this list today is because I only read 2 volumes. But again, these were 2 amazing volumes, and the format of the manga does feel very different than the anime, even though it really shouldn't looking back on it, but it does feel more simple in a way. But it's still really fun and comforting and hit all of the emotional notes for me that it needed to. Even if I don't always love all of the characters or jokes, they're another huge favorite of mine, and I can't wait to get to the point where I am at new content that I haven't seen yet, since I am still in anime territory here. Next, we have volumes 1 through 4 of The Summer Hikaru Died, and this follows 2 boys who lived in the same village and did everything together as they were best friends, until something happens to one of them, Hikaru, that changes him forever when all his best friend wants to do is stay by his side. This series is so interesting, and I feel like they're only getting more interesting by the volume in terms of mystery. And I also feel like we got a really interesting deep dive into the main relationship here, and it is such a complex dynamic. And then there's also also just like this underlying sadness here in terms of what could have been with that relationship. And I really felt that throughout the entire time I was reading this series. It also does have like a perfect summer horror atmosphere that I love so much, and I cannot wait for the next volume to come out. Next up, we have chapters 15 to 62 of Kagurabachi. And this follows our main character, who is the son of a renowned swordsmith, when he sets out on a journey with the last of his father's magical swords on a quest for revenge against a villainous group. This was one that I was super excited about when it first came out, and it honestly did dip a little for me. I still really liked it, but it was only just like recently that I've gotten really invested in it. And now I'm back to having that excitement that I had for it originally, and I do really love this current arc and just like the storyline and kind of just everything they're doing. Like the chapters that they released in December before the year ended were so incredible. And this is another one with some really interesting characters and amazing action scenes and just like a really cool art style and vibe. They're like just the right amount of edgy. And I am so excited for the future of this series, both in terms of manga and anime, because they did also get confirmed for that in 2024, which is so fun and something that I've always wanted from the series from the beginning. Even though they were also probably always going to get that adaptation, but you know, it's nice to see it confirmed for sure. Next, we have another one-shot, which is Look Back. And Look Back follows our main character who draws a manga strip for her school newspaper, which makes her the star of her 4th grade class. That is until another student also begins drawing manga for the school newspaper, and she begins to compare her work to the students. So this was the Tatsuki Fujimoto story that really stole my heart this year. Again, I would have loved a little bit of slower pacing to just really dive further into the relationship here and just emotionally attach myself to them even more. But I loved all of the little moments here, and I feel like this really thrived in the slice of life and also commentary about manga in general. And I also do think that the movie fully helped me fall in love with this as well, and I think I appreciate the manga even more now because of it. But yeah, I wasn't sure about the ending originally, but I do think that I have changed my mind now. I really like this. And that is going to bring us to Uzumaki, which takes place in a small town and follows our main character and her boyfriend, who believes that the town has been cursed by a mysterious hypnotic spiral. And oh, has it ever been cursed by that hypnotic mysterious spiral. And this was by far my favorite Junji Ito story that I read in 2024, and also just kind of ever, and I'm honestly not sure if it's that close. But this was the first time I ever found myself interested in the characters and their relationships in a Junji Ito story, and I got really invested in them and also just so invested in the story itself. Like, it's a weird one, but it works so well with the horror, and I feel like it could have very easily have looked silly. I do wish that we dove a little bit further into the cosmic horror of it all, but I do have a lot of love for this. And when I look back on this, I appreciate it more every time I think about it. Next, we have chapters 92 to 140 of Akane-banashi, and this follows our main character Akane, who is diving into the Rakugo world to chase her dream of becoming the highest rank that she can, and also avenge her father after he was expelled from the Rakugo world when she was younger. I have been reading and have been caught up to this series for a long time now, and it really did have some incredible moments in 2024. And I feel like the things that they've always teased are finally starting to get exposed and come together. And I also just really like our main character, but the series does have a lot of really great and amazing characters in general. A lot of them are very fun and very interesting, and I feel like the series managed to get me really invested in them as well, while also keeping me invested in the storyline and all of the turns that that is taking, while also just continuing to teach me about the Rakugo world. I have a good handful of favorite manga series that I am currently caught up to and reading chapters from as they update, and this one was one of my favorites of those favorites in 2024. Next, we have volumes 4 through 12, and then like one chapter out of volume 13 of Jujutsu Kaisen. And this follows our main character, who is a high schooler that spends his days with the occult club and visiting his hospitalized grandfather. However, he soon gets exposed to the world of curses after he unknowingly encounters a cursed item, of which he ends up swallowing, and this item ends up being the finger of the king of curses himself. And with the newfound powers that the finger gives him, he is then enrolled in the Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School, where he begins his journey of becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer. I got really invested in this series at the beginning of the year, and I am still currently reading chapters that the anime's already covered, but this has been an amazing revisit so far. And I also somehow feel like I love the characters even more than I already did. And even though I am super invested, I have been pacing myself through the Shibuya arc because that just feels like something that I need to do. And there are things in this arc that I just really don't want my heart to experience again, but I'll get there because I do also want to see how else they can destroy me emotionally in the future. future. And I've also only ever heard amazing things about the manga in general, and I definitely see why so far. Next we have volumes 1 through 14 of Kimi ni Todoke, From Me to You. And this follows our main character who has always had trouble fitting in due to her horror movie-like appearance. However, everything begins to change when she befriends the most popular boy in her class. I read a lot of this series in 2024, and it was also one of my most wholesome and adorable series of 2024. And it was also just a relaxing read in general. It makes my heart very happy. And they are a little bit more tropey than I would usually love, so I haven't loved all of the drama, but I do really love the romance. And also all of the friendships. It is all just so sweet, and again, makes my heart very happy. And even though I have read a lot of this series so far, I still have a lot of this series left, so hopefully I get to have more amazing moments with them soon. But I will also say this is very much a spring/summer series for me. Like, it needs to be bright and sunny and kind of warm when I read them, and that just feels correct, and so far my brain has been refusing to read them at any other time, but we'll see, because I do miss them. And I'm not going to get all of these out because it is too much, but next is volumes 10 through 23 of Demon Slayer. And this follows our main character whose peaceful life is shattered when his entire family is slaughtered by a demon, and this is an attack that turns his little sister, who is really the only survivor, into a demon, so he sets out to try to turn his sister back to normal and also avenge his family. Once I picked up this series in 2024, it was like I couldn't put it down until it was over, and it fully took over my brain for a long time in a way that I wasn't expecting. And it was also at a time where my opinion on this series might have been at its lowest with the Hashira training arc anime. And the manga not only saved my relationship with that arc, but maybe just the series in general. And it also gave me what is my first experience with my favorite arc, and that is Infinity Castle. There were so many incredible battles, and I felt like all of the characters got to really get involved and have their moment and just participate. And they made me sob at multiple points, like I was not okay. And it was also the manga that really got me attached to Mitsuri, who was like slowly becoming a favorite character of mine, but this fully did it. And I feel like it did that with a lot of the characters, like even the characters that weren't my favorites in the anime, I feel like I have a much better appreciation of them now. I will also say I didn't love the ending, and I actually really hated a couple of the final moments and one of the final chapters, but this series still has my heart, and like I said, I still really enjoyed all of the other content, both new and revisited from the anime, a lot. Next we have volumes 9 and 10 of Skip and Loafer. And Skip and Loafer follows our main character who comes from a small country town but is chasing her dreams in a large Tokyo high school, where she finds out that the social norms of city high schoolers are more out of her element than she originally thought. This is another one that I only read 2 volumes of this year, but that's only because that's all that they had, since I am caught up to this series, but they really did make the most out of these 2 volumes for me. I specifically really loved and adored volume 9, while volume 10 felt more like a setup for future volumes, but there were still so many incredible moments in both of these volumes in between the characters, and it was so much fun and so comfy as always. And if you don't know, this was my favorite anime and manga of 2023, and if you want to know why, I do have a full review of this series up on my channel, but my love for this series has not changed at all in 2024. Next up we have volumes 1 through 8 of Whisper Me a Love Song. Again, not going to get out all of the volumes here because that shelf will not survive it. But this follows our main character Himari, who falls in love with her upperclassman after hearing her band perform on the first day of school. She confesses, and then this girl confesses back, and then Himari realizes that they are feeling 2 different kinds of love and begins to wonder what love really means. This series did have a little bit of a slow start for me. It wasn't until around volume 3 where I really started to get into this. Like, the first 3 volumes were still good, but once I was in, I was fully in, and this romance is so adorable. I love them so much. And they have such amazing characters just in general. It is so cute and wholesome and fun, but it is also really complex at the same time. Like, there is some band drama here for sure. And I loved all of the rivalry and all of the moving parts, and there are some really heartbreaking moments in here as well when it comes to the backstories. And the art style is also really beautiful as well. And the situation surrounding their anime adaptation in 2024 is really unfortunate, and I do really feel awful for the people who were hurt by that situation. And the anime industry just really needs to do better when it comes to these kinds of things in general. But yeah, this is what we have at this point, and if you watch that adaptation and there was any part of you that liked this series or saw potential in it, I would definitely recommend the manga It's one of my favorites. Next up, we have chapters 131 to 178 of Blue Box. And Blue Box follows their main character, who is a Batman player who falls for a girl on the basketball team who inspires him to try to get to nationals. And again, we have another series that falls into the series that I read as a update category. And Blue Box just had such an incredible year, including their anime adaptation, but the manga has also definitely been really good as well. I love the romance here, and I love seeing them together. They have so many sweet moments, and I just love seeing them support one another. But we also got into some other relationships as well, and I can't wait to see where they all go from here because I really love the dynamics. And we also got to dive more into some other characters just in general, and I loved getting to know them better. There are also a lot of really fun moments and friendships, but also some really heartbreaking ones that genuinely hurt my heart. Blue Box is a series that stole my heart right away when I started reading them years ago now, and they've only stolen it even more. And this is a series that I really do feel like has thrived in all ways in 2024, and I am so happy for them. Next up, we have volumes 1 and 2 of Hat Atelier. And this is set in a world where everybody takes magic for granted, and our main character Coco wants to be a witch. It's her dream, but she wasn't born with the gift for magic. She's about to give up, but that all changes when she meets a traveling magician who is performing magic in a way that she's never seen before. As she quickly learns that what everybody else knows about magic may not be the entire truth, and her dream may not be as far away from her as she originally thought. And speaking of things that stole my heart immediately, this art style is one of them, and it has to be one of my favorites of all time. It gives me everything that I have ever wanted from a fantasy manga, and also just fantasy in general and more. But I also really love the characters, and I love how they balance like a good fantasy storyline that does get dark at times with just like adorable, relaxing slice of life. And I love all of their magic and coming of age themes as well, and I picked this series up originally because they do have an anime adaptation coming out in 2025, and it already has a lot of hype around it. And I can easily see why. This is incredible. And once I read more of this, I could easily see it becoming one of my favorite series of all time, because it kind of already has become one of my favorite series of all time, and I've only read 2 volumes. And this is one that I am just so excited about overall. And we have now reached my top 3, starting at number 3 with Bloom Into You. And Bloom Into You follows our main character, who is a big fan of shoujo manga and has always dreamed of the day where she would receive a confession of her own. However, when that day comes from one of her male classmates, she ends up feeling nothing. As she enters high school, still unsure of how to respond to this person, but gets inspired when she sees the student council president turn down her own suitor. So she goes to ask her for advice, but our main character's romance may have finally begun, however, when the next confession that she receives comes from the student council president herself. So a couple of years ago, I read the first novel in their light novel spin-off series, but I have been wanting to read this manga series for even longer before that, and it took forever to get my hands on all 8 volumes. That's why I turned to the spin-off series first. But it happened eventually, and I am so glad that it did. There were things that I expected from the series, having not watched the anime going into reading this. I expected a QGL series with some angst, and I also expected it to be good because I've only ever heard amazing things about this series. But what I didn't expect was the attachment and personal connections that I would find here, specifically with Toko's storyline and character growth. And it's not an exact matchup, but it really did mean a lot to me, and that's probably an understatement. Like, I think this really changed my mindset in ways that I really needed, and I wasn't expecting that, but I am certainly grateful for it. But it is also that QGL series with angst that I mentioned a second ago, and I got so invested in that as well, and their relationship, and this series just has so many beautiful moments, both visually and also in terms of the story and the characters. It had some amazing friendships as well. So overall, this has always been a series that I have always assumed that I would really like once I eventually got to it. And I was right, but I ended up loving it in a way that feels really special to me and just makes it one of my favorites. And in second place, we have chapters 47 to 65 of You and I Are Polar Opposites. And this is a romantic comedy that follows our energetic main character named Suzuki, who falls for the quiet boy in her class named Tani. This is one of my favorite romantic comedy series that I have ever read, and I've been reading it almost since the beginning when it started, and now it's over, and I am so sad about that. But it also did get confirmed for an anime adaptation for 2026, and that has always been my biggest dream for it, and I still almost can't believe that that is actually happening, but I am so excited that it is. It is just so adorable and fun with so many incredible characters. I love the way that they all interact with one another and just communicate with each other. It all feels so healthy and sweet sweet, and this was just a series that I knew that whenever I read a chapter from it, I would leave that chapter feeling better than I did before reading it. It really does have my entire heart, and it's also one of those romantic comedies that dove a little bit deeper and gave me actual life advice. And I love the way that this series went about that, and we also got a good amount from all three of our main couples throughout 2024, including a really good slow burn romance that is currently still slow burning, even though it is over. But I love their final moments in this series so much, and I can say that for all three of our main couples. This is another one that has really amazing art and character designs. It's all very cute. And when I first started reading this series, I never could have expected how good that they would be and just like how much they would come to mean to me. But they are, and they do, and I still feel like they are underrated right now, but hopefully that changes the next time that I talk about this series, hopefully in 2026 when their anime adaptation is on my favorite anime of 2026 list. Because it better be there, and I cannot put into words how badly I need that adaptation to be good. And that is going to leave us with just one more series. And I almost did give the top spot to You and I Are Polar Opposites. It was pretty close, and it kind of hurts my heart that I didn't do that. But like I said in my favorite anime of 2024 video, when it comes down to both my anime watching and my manga reading life, they were both just dominated by one series. And that is Kaiju number 8, and I read volumes 1 through 9 and chapters 74 to 119 in 2024. And Kaiju number 8 follows our main character who wants to chase his dream of defeating Kaiju by the side of his childhood best friend. This was a dream that he had previously given up on, but when the time comes for him to chase his dreams again, he ends up gaining the power to turn into a Kaiju. Like I said, I read 3 chapters in 2023 and then the rest of this in 2024, and it was like as soon as I started it, I got so fully invested in it, and it quickly became one of my favorite series of all time. And the first things that really attached me to this series were the characters and the comedy. They are a lot of fun. They have like that chaotic Haikyuu energy and banter that I really love, and again, I got attached to these characters very quickly. And I feel like they all got introduced in a way that allowed me to get like properly excited about them and interested in them, and it allowed me to have a lot of favorites, which I certainly do. But the next thing was definitely the art style, and I do sometimes have trouble getting into action scenes in shonen, but these were some of the most fun that I had all year. The art is so clean, and it makes everything seem so high-powered and hard-hitting and just like everything you want from a kaiju fighting series. And it also allowed the characters that I really love to have some really cool moments, and I just got so invested in the storyline as a whole and just all of the lore and history here. And do I think that they could have dove a little bit deeper at times and really just showed everything off? Yes, definitely. It's part of why I love Kaiju number 8 B-sides so much. But I also do really love the pacing of this main series at the same time, because they don't waste time at all, even if I do wish they would sometimes. Which, if I want you to waste my time because I want to spend more time with you, that's incredible. It really does not happen often. But it did happen with Kaiju number 8, and it not only gave me some of my favorite moments of 2024, but it just gave me some of my favorite moments ever. And this was the year that we found each other, so even though I read some really incredible manga in 2024, and I really did, I can't imagine giving anything else a spot on this list, even though I kind of did want to. They just really did earn it for me in 2024. Okay, so I do have full reviews on quite a few of these series that I talked about today, and also a manga journal that's been really fun that I will have linked down in the description and also the comments section if you want my more in-depth thoughts. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that, and hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye.